Order of the day number 3.
Education Board of Trustee Freedom Amendment Bill, first reading.
The Honourable Sir Roger Douglas.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Education Board of Trustees Freedom Amendment Bill be now read for the first time. Mr Speaker, the purpose of this bill is to give boards of trustees much greater freedom in how they manage school affairs. Currently, schools are free to decide how they spend operational grants, as the Ministry acknowledges that they know the best uses for the money. But when it comes to teachers' salaries, schools have little say, and that they cannot trade off between salaries and other forms of spending. This bill is similar to what National introduced in the 1990s, the fully funded option, alternatively known as bulk funding. I just want to talk briefly about that experience. The Ministry of Education undertook in the late 1990s to determine how schools which opted for full funding option fared. What they found was an overwhelming positive. 94% of respondent schools felt that they had been mostly advantaged by bulk funding. 80% confirmed that their school would prefer to continue with bulk funding. They found also that the common chain that was then made, that bulk funding, or the common claim, that helped the wealthy but not the poor schools, was totally incorrect. After all, the previous model of bulk funding was optional, and 36% of bulk funded schools came from those in low decile areas, deciles 1 to 3. Why would so many low decile schools opt in if the scheme in fact harmed them? And what did the schools use the money for? Over 80% of bulk funded schools use the money to hire extra teaching staff. This shows that schools use the increased flexibility in order to increase teacher quantity and quality. Why should schools be permitted, or prohibited, I should say, from doing this? Now, as soon as the bill was drawn, there were numerous attacks made on it. Probably the worst came from the Labor Party. Trevor Mallard stated that the bill was unnecessary because schools could already increase salaries by moving around their management units. Well, first, if the Labor Party likes flexibility, what's the problem in extending it? But second, management units are a terrible way of rewarding good teachers for performance. It is absurd that the only way to pay good teachers more is to put them into a managerial role, seeing them spend more time out of the classroom in order to receive higher wages. Why would Labor support a policy that sees the best teachers not teaching? How would this bill place us internationally? Well, the Australian Labor Party has just announced a policy to give schools much greater control over their budget. Prime Minister Julia Gillard has argued that it is unfair to create league tables of schools while tying their hands over improving their relative position by preventing them from managing their own staff. In other words, this National Party is to the left of the Australian Labor Party. How would, in fact, a principled National Party vote? Well, they say that they support freedom of choice. That's what they say. Why shouldn't schools have the choice to pay teachers more, to reward good teachers, to hire more staff, rather than build a new gym, if that was their choice? Of course, they should have that choice. They say they support rewards for achievement. Well, why shouldn't quality teachers be paid more than subpar teachers? Why shouldn't we try to attract some of the best and brightest into the teaching profession? Of course, there's no chance that National will vote for this. After all, National have spent the past 2 years in government desperately trying to prove that they stand for nothing and that they just want to be popular. They will happily sacrifice good policy at the altar of the Prime Minister's popularity. They will happily vote down a bill that was once their policy. They will happily pretend that they do not believe in this bill because they want to govern for governing's sake. They simply do not care about the quality of the policies. They do not care about the children. They care only about the possibility that they might lose a vote or two. Children don't vote. Teachers do. Yes, it is, my friend. It is like that. Mr. Speaker, children spend around 15,000 hours of their lives in the classroom. What they get out of it matters for the rest of their lives, and it impacts on how well New Zealand fares. Good teachers are the most important factor in whether children benefit from schools. Teachers determine whether children get a quality education, not the curriculum, not the class size, not funding, not computers or the internet. These are all secondary to having quality teachers. This bill is all about allowing schools to employ and retain quality teachers. During the work of the Working Party on school choice, one thing became clear. That was the desire of head teachers to have more control over staffing issues. This included training from Decile 1 to Decile 10. Head teachers wanted to be able to train their own teachers. They wanted more pay flexibility. This bill would allow that to happen. Mr. Speaker, the centralisation of policy that has occurred in education over the last 40 or 50 years was in part aimed at driving out poor teachers through government fiat. It has failed miserably. Decisions on how and what to teach and on the deployment of resources were taken away from head teachers in schools and are now made in Wellington with disastrous results. The fact is that 30% of children leaving school or leave school without inadequate outcomes in mathematics and reading and writing skills. Mr. Speaker, any other business in New Zealand that failed 30% of their children just simply would not survive. The fact is that the rules and regulation which are basic to centralisation disempower teachers. The result, Mr. Speaker, is that they drive out good teachers and they protect poor ones. New Zealand has ended up with an education system that simply cannot work, and in an overall sense, it fails between 25% and 40% of all students. The system is propped up by many good schools which continue to exist despite the system rather than because of it. What we have in New Zealand is a centralised system of planning and direction, Soviet Union style, a system which systematically shuts out the power of incentives and choice to raise standards. My bill helps, but does not solve the problem. The Department of Education, which created and runs this education monopoly, is also a monopoly provider of advice to ministers on policy and how the system might change. The result is, Mr. Speaker, is that we have a closed system which locks in declining performance.
The question is that the motion be agreed to.
Speaker.
I call Joe Goodhue.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak on this bill, and I want to say from the outset